Hi, this is John Luke Martel, and I want to make I'm completely new at this, but I'm going to put some thoughts out there on how not to make people feel like shit, essentially. I was just in a situation today where I was put in a situation where, unintentionally or not, deservedly or not, it doesn't matter, I was left feeling powerless. I was in a situation where essentially I was being the equivalent of being called on to into the principal's office, except with a lot more on the line, and it's usually on you usually have in the principal's office. I had like essentially my career was on the line. You know, I was, and my career hasn't even started yet, and I knew on some instinctive level that was the level of shit I was dealing with. So, anyways, why are my eyes not looking straight into the camera? Anyways, sorry, I'm new at this. Just please bear with me a bit. And I've been in this situation many times before, where essentially I'm called in by whoever's in charge for whatever, and they basically expect me to sit there, listen to whatever they have to say. It doesn't matter how right or wrong or anywhere in between they are. It doesn't matter. Essentially, it doesn't matter. I'm just, they just expect me to just sit there and take whatever it is they're saying, and not, and just deal with it, essentially. All right. And it's a very bad feeling when somebody knows that they've got you over the barrel, that you have no choice but to take it and listen to them and not object, regardless of what you think about what they're saying. Or not even what you think, what you know about what they're saying or what the other person in the room, aside from them, is saying. Like in a situation where somebody's essentially, they've they've made some stuff out of context, deliberately or not, and you can't say anything because they've got the person on their side with all the power. That's essentially the situation I was in to an extent, and I respect this man. I respect this man, or well, I'm not sure how I feel about him right now, but I respect him because he's a professional. But here is the problem. The position he's in over me is of the kind of power where I have to shut up and listen. Now, on some level, that's good. Now, the problem was that the environment was not a work environment. It was hell. It was an educational environment, right? And I was being told this is the way it is, and he was very angry. I mean, like red in the face, the whole thing. He was not unsympathetic, far from it, but he was about as far from being emotionally uninvested, shall we say, as you could get. He was very angry. Um, he was angry for not that the reasons were necessarily wrong. I'm not saying that they were, far from it, but he lost his cool. I mean, he really lost his cool. And more importantly, he had me in a very uncomfortable situation where I had no choice but to do this for like 30 minutes. And I think most people have had an experience in their life where they know what that feels like. Anybody who's had ever been in an abusive relationship knows exactly what I'm talking about, right? Which is ironic because that's exactly what this guy was using as a metaphor. He said, I was acting like a guy who is subconsciously passing off abuse to other people from his abusive father. I'm not even going to try and deny that I had, emphasis on had, an abusive father. Not even going to try and deny it. I did. It happened. In fact, he was more than abusive. He was completely worthless. Uh, um, but the problem in this particular situation was that he didn't seem to realize that what he was talking about, he was also doing himself. I know it's because he cared about me. Not that that's an excuse, and that's my point. You're allowed to get angry to a point, but showing it the way he did, in a way that it makes the other person definitely feel like they're not safe, essentially. They're not comfortable. I didn't feel like don't get me wrong, I didn't feel like I was in any way, shape, or form a physical threat. But then again, you don't have to feel physically threatened to feel threatened, right? That's something a lot of people just don't get, is physical threats are actually, in many ways, the least kind of threat you can give somebody. I can deal with somebody coming at me with fists. Now, it's much more difficult to deal with somebody, especially somebody whose heart is in the right place, who is very angry at you and is making you very uncomfortable, and as doing it and more importantly has a position of power that you cannot just say, well, you basically can't speak your mind, essentially, is what it comes down to, because you're already in it up to your neck. And if you say anything else in the situation you're in, because they're already really angry at you, you don't know what they'll do, And I was basically being served a last minute warning notice, like, you're on very thin ice. That kind of thing. Like one more slip, And I was getting essentially what amounted to secondhand. Apparently I'd made some people uncomfortable. I do that. I don't do it deliberately. But I will freely admit I do it. Let me clear some stuff up first. I have got high functioning autism or Asperger's. Take your pick. Which one you want to call it. And I'm not using this as a crutch or an excuse. I just have it. It's something I have to deal with. Unfortunately, especially from where I'm standing, whatever, the version that I have is what I like to personally refer to as very high functioning. Like, I have very few of the downsides to the, and most of the good points. Like, I've got the intelligence, I've got the creativity and all that stuff. What I'm not very good at doing is reading people, more specifically reading their faces. I'm quite empathic. That's a very common myth about people with Asperger's or autism in general. They're not empathic. It's sometimes that's just patently flat out nonsense. In fact, people with autism, or at least I'm going on my personal experience, I feel people's emotions. Like, I really feel them, like, in my gut, this gut right here, And the way this guy was talking to me, it made me feel like my gut was being, like, my gut was a balloon and somebody let out all the air. That's literally what it felt like. And that's often what it feels like when I'm emotionally in a situation where, in an emotionally, shall we say, charged or very tense situation. I will get that hollow feeling in my gut, like it doesn't matter how much I've eaten that day, for example. It'll feel like I'm literally just like that. My stomach just completely emptied out and dried up, and it's just the way it works. And oh, great. Now my foot's going into spasms. And here's something else I have to deal with. My foot going into spasms. So yeah, I don't know. So yeah, I mean, it's a very bad position to be in when you're up against somebody, especially somebody you actually do respect. This lighting sucks, but whatever. especially somebody you actually do respect. You know, hold on a second.